Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia is releasing on the 19th of May 2017 for the 3DS. It's a remake of a 1992 title that released on the Famicom, or the NES if you're not in America, called Fire Emblem Gaiden, which was the second entry in the Fire Emblem series. Now, Matthew, who I should point out is suffering rather from a cold at the moment, is going to give us a spoiler-free rendition of what the story scenario is.
As war breaks out, you control two groups of characters. One led by Elm, who is fighting off an invasion from a neighbouring kingdom, and the other led by Celica, who's looking for the god Miller to prevent further war and bloodshed.
Now, just to point out, Fire Emblem, this particular Fire Emblem is a JRPG, or more specifically a tactical role-playing game. So how does it play, and more crucially, is it fun?
It plays like previous Fire Emblem games. It's a turn-based strategy. But if you're familiar with previous Fire Emblem games, you may be shocked at how it's stitched for weapon triangles, which in my opinion takes a lot of the strategy out of the game, especially with overly basic map design of mostly just big open areas, which make it difficult to protect your more vulnerable units like healers, mages and archers. And it can just make the game can sometimes feel more about luck than skill at times. Then there's the turn wheel, which gives you the ability to rewind turns. I think you can do it 3 times a fight to fix mistakes you've made at the beginning, or hope for a bit of luck when repeating an enemy turn. And the biggest difference between this and other Fire Emblem games is the addition of dungeons. Similar with the likes of Persona or Final Fantasy, with enemies lurking ready to trigger a battle. I felt these dungeons were underused, especially in the story, because they only really felt right when they were used as part of the story, which wasn't often enough. And most of the rest of the game were just boring sections like side quests, which added very little.
So kind of like filler?
Very much like filler. I mean, the main reason for doing it was to get to the shrine at the end so you could evolve your character's classes to the next class if they were at a high enough level. And in the second half of the game I found quite a few difficulty spikes, with some becoming extremely frustrating and over-challenging, and requiring a lot of luck in the end to actually get through the battles.
Do you think some of this is down to the fact that it's a remake of a 25-year-old game?
Absolutely, and I think they stuck too much to maybe the old-fashioned maps instead of, making them a bit more fun and strategic. Although they have obviously added the difficulty settings where you can make your characters come back if they die at the end of the battle.
Right, so there are acknowledgements that games were a little bit more hardcore back then.
But overall, I think they are. It still shows that it's a remake of a very old game.
Okay, how long is it, and crucially, does it ever feel grindy?
This is going to sound really stupid actually, but I never had to grind. But I almost wish there was maybe a section 2 grinding, especially for them extremely tougher levels where there's nothing you could really do to up your character's levels.
So it wasn't grindy enough, because grind does actually often serve an important purpose in, as you say, getting you up to the level required by the game.
Absolutely, especially in games like Disgaea and Fire Emblem, so it almost could have done with a little section of grinding.
Mm-hmm.
And onto the question about how long it is, it took me about 25 to 30 hours to complete.
A decent length, and I mean that is actually quite an achievement to have approximately 30-hour game that doesn't feel grindy.
Exactly, yeah.
How does it look graphically? It's an old game, but have they tarted up the graphics?
Obviously it's been very tarted up. I mean, it's nothing like the original in 1992, but the graphics is still nothing, to write home about. They do the job though. The story is in an anime visual novel style, which is very nice, and battles go for a retro pixelated art style of older Fire Emblem games, which I also quite liked.
Got to love the retro pixel art style.
Exactly, it was a nice change, to be honest.
But how does it sound? Is it fully voice acted, and what's the quality of the acting like?
For the first time in the series history, it's actually fully voice acted, most of which was to a high standard, and the soundtrack was very nice, atmospheric, and added a lot to the game, I felt.
So it sounds like this could really be the area that had the most attention lavished upon it. So good soundtrack, great voice acting. I always love to see full voice acting in games like this. Even stuff like Nier Automata doesn't quite have full voice acting in.
Yeah, it really added to the game.
Where does it stand in relation to the other Fire Emblems?
I'm actually going to say it's nowhere near as good as the more recent Fire Emblem Awakening and Fate. Maybe more on par with Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon. I think it was 2009 on DS, which was also a remake.
So yeah, the newer Fire Emblems are kind of making them more to modern gaming standards, whereas the remakes are making concessions to modern gaming, but still at their core are fairly old games.
Absolutely.
Now you played this on a first generation 3DS. Was there any slowdown or any technical issues at all?
Not what I noticed was playing through, so I'd say that's a solid no.
Wrapping up, what were the best points about this game?
I liked the turn wheel and the ability to rewind turns. It had a very good cast of likeable and memorable characters. There was less item management actually than newer games, as items don't break and you can only equip one item per character, so that was actually maybe an older thing, which was quite nice. And soundtrack and story were obviously first class.
So not all of those old school gaming traditions are bad then. What are the bad points?
I just felt the map design was overly simplistic. The missions with castles and stuff were a lot better. It was easier to protect your characters. It just could have done with more better map design, more variants instead of just big open squares. And obviously the difficulty spikes got annoying, and it was a little bit too basic by scrapping the weapon triangle.
What score are you going to give it, and basically, should people buy it?
Although it may seem like I'm spurting out a lot of negatives here, it's a still highly enjoyable game, and it's a good entry into the series, but ultimately fails to reach the heights set by Fire Emblem Awakening and Fates. If you're a massive Fire Emblem fan, then absolutely you should buy it. If you're new to Fire Emblem, then I'd say go for Awakening, then Fates maybe, and I think for that it earns a 77%.
Which on our review scale is good, so definitely one for the Fire Emblem veterans, although there are better places for newbies to jump on.